everyone, my name is Leticia de Souza, and this is the second portion of your review for the anatomical models, specifically for the appendicular skeleton. So as you can see here in the skeleton, you can see the pelvic girdle. So we'll talk about the pelvic girdle and then the lower limbs. So first of all, looking at the pelvic girdle, you see how the pelvic girdle is composed by two pelvic bones. You have one here, you have another one here. In the middle of the two pelvic bones, you have a sacrum, and the sacrum is not part of the pelvic girdle. Also, you have a ring of cartilage called the symphysis pubis right in the middle of both pelvic bones, and that kind of keeps them together. So extremely important. So yes, now let's go over the pelvic bone a little bit more closely. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do whenever you're looking at the pelvic bone is to know what is anterior and what is posterior. So the first thing that we have here, do you see this notch? This is called the greater sciatic notch, and that tells us that this is going to be posterior. And then if this is posterior, then we know that this area is going to be anterior, correct? That's going to be your pubis. So overall, your pelvic bone is composed by three fused bones. So one, it's called the ilium, and that's going to be the superior portion of your pelvic bone. Then the second one is called the ischium, which is going to be the posterior and inferior portion of your pelvic bone. And then the third one is your pubis, so that's right here is going to be the inferior and anterior portion of your pelvic bone. So now that we understand that this is anterior and this is going to be posterior, we can talk about the structures, correct? And also, just for you to have an idea, here in the lateral side we have this process that is called acetabulum, where your femur attaches and articulates you. So the femur is the first bone of your lower limb, So here we know that this area right here is going to be lateral as well. So let's talk about those structures. First of all, this is called the iliac crest. So you see how thick it is? Iliac crest. Then here you have the iliac fossa. Then we have 4 different spines. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spines. So first of all, this spine right here is called the anterior superior iliac spine. So anterior superior iliac spine, because anterior is in the front, superior is on the top, iliac is in the ilium, and then spine because it's a sharp pointed ridge. Then we have right in the bottom, we have our anterior inferior iliac spine. So that's going to be in the front again, in the bottom, and also in the iliac bone and a sharp pointed ridge. So here, if you continue from the anterior superior iliac spine and you follow with the crest and then you go towards the posterior portion, then you can see 2 other spines. So this is going to be called the posterior superior iliac spine because it's posterior, it's going to be towards the back, is superior towards the top, and iliac spine. And then this one, same thing, posterior inferior iliac spine, because it's going to be towards the bottom. And then lastly, we talk about the greater sciatic notch right here. So we can move on and we can talk about the ischium. So now, thinking about the ischium, let me move my manual so I can remember the structures that we need to talk about. So we just mentioned the acetabulum, correct? Right here in this area, so we're good to go. Oops, we're good to go. So now we have the obturator foramen, which is right here. So this is where the obturator nerve is going to be passing through. In addition to that, we have also, do you see how we have the greater sciatic notch that we just talked about? We have also the lesser sciatic notch, which is going to be right here on the bottom. So greater sciatic notch, lesser sciatic notch, and then spine. And that's going to be called the ischial spine. In addition to that, we have this little area right here towards the back, as you can see here, where kind of the bone is sitting on. So this is your ischial tuberosity. So a large rounded projection here is where you usually sit. So in addition to that, we have something called the iliopectineal line in this area right here. So let's talk about the pubis now. So here you see the pubis, which is anterior, correct? So the pubis has a superior portion, which is the superior ramus, and then the inferior ramus right here in the bottom. So superior ramus and then inferior ramus. And then right here in this area, we're going to have the symphysis pubis, which is the ring of cartilage that we just talked about. So let's go over very quick. So we have the iliac crest, iliac fossa, and then we have anterior superior iliac spine, anterior inferior iliac spine, posterior superior iliac spine, posterior inferior iliac spine, greater sciatic notch, lesser sciatic notch, ischial spine. Then we have the superior ramus of the pubis, inferior ramus of the pubis, symphysis pubis, obturator foramen, and then towards the side we have the acetabulum. So we're good to go with the pelvic bone. So now we can move to the femur. So the femur is going to be the first bone of your lower limbs. So here you can see the femur. Wish you could see the whole thing here. Let's see if I can make it. Nope. Maybe like this. So here you have the femur. So the first thing I need to figure out is what is anterior and what is posterior. So we know that this is going to be an anterior view because you can see this area, which is the patellar surface. And the patella, which is, oh, I don't have the patella here. Just give me a second. So the patella is going to be articulating to this area right here. So that's why it's called the patellar surface. But anyways, so here is going to be anterior. If you move to posterior view, then you can see the condyles. So that's going to be different from your humerus, correct? Because the humerus had the condyles in the front. So here we know that this is going to be posterior. So second question is, what is medial and what's lateral? Well, so we know that the head of the femur is here. So we know that this area is going to be medial and this area is going to be lateral. So again, so here we have, hopefully there's no light here for you. So here we have the head of the femur, then we have the neck of the femur right here, the narrow area around the head. So in the head, we also have this area called the fovea capitis right here. Can you see it? So it's a little dimple, like a little oval-shaped structure here, where your ligament teres is going to be passing through. So in addition to that, we have the body of the femur, which is the main structure right here. In addition, if we move, I want you to see a little bit better. So we also have two structures here to talk about. The greater trochanter and then the lesser trochanter. And then if you turn, then you can see it really well here as well. We have the greater trochanter and then the lesser trochanter. This is just like a super fancy word for the tubercle, right? But we call it trochanter because it's way bigger. So just look at this space between trochanters. So here, this is going to be called the intertrochanteric crest because it's really thick. And then this is going to be posterior. And then if you move to anterior, we call it intertrochanteric line. Do you see how it's not that prominent? So that's why. In addition to that, what else do we have here? So now we have the linea aspera and then the gluteal tuberosity. So if you're looking from a posterior view, then you can see the linea aspera right here in the middle. And then the gluteal tuberosity is going to be more towards the superior portion right here. So hopefully you guys can see it. Here you have the linea aspera, and then here you have the gluteal tuberosity. Then, continuing to move on, then if you look at the distal portion of your femur, then you can see the condyles really well. So we know that this is the head, so this is going to be the medial condyle, and then we have the lateral condyle right here. Always on top of the condyles, you have the epicondyles. So we have above the condyle, epicondyle here as well. In the area in between the condyles, we call it intercondylar fossa. So right here in the middle. And then, of course, I told you that this is called the patellar surface. It's actually the patellar groove. So that's where your patella is going to be attaching to. So now we can move on and we can talk about the tibia. So here we have the tibia. So we know that the tibia is showing you the anterior portion because we can see the tibial tuberosity here, which is this prominence right here. So if you look from the back, you don't see the prominence super well. In addition to that, you can see what is interesting about the tibia is that the condyles are actually towards the proximal area, so closer to the point of attachment. So do you see? Hopefully you guys can see even with the light. But the condyles are here, right here. So we have the medial condyle and then the lateral condyle in the tibia. In addition to that, let's see what else we have to talk about. So we also have the intercondylar eminence. So that's going to be this area in between both of the condyles, intercondylar eminence. So we just talked about the tibial tuberosity. So now we have the anterior crest right here, which is the ridge of the bone. It's really sharp and it's going to make your shin. In addition, we have the interosseous border right here, which is going to be the area in between. Oh, sorry, it's actually going to be right here because we're talking about, yeah, so it's going to be right here, the interosseous border, because this is lateral and this is going to be medial. No, not really, because we're talking about the tibia. This is medial and this is going to be lateral. Yeah, no, that's right, perfect. So, wait, let me think about it now because I got confused. So the malleolus is medial. So this means that this is going to be medial. So if it's medial, it means that, yeah, here is going to be the interosseous border. Yes, perfect. So, and then lastly, we have the medial malleolus that I just mentioned, right here in the bottom. This is the medial malleolus, right here. So now we can talk about the fibula. So the fibula, we have the head of the fibula, really easy to find, and then we have the lateral malleolus right here in the bottom. So, oh, I didn't mention the patella too. So here we have the patella. We have three structures to know about. So first of all, on the top of the patella, we have the base. Then in the bottom, we have the apex. And then if you turn posteriorly, then you can see the two facets. One is the medial facet, and then the other one is the lateral facet. The lateral facet is larger. The medial facet is smaller. And now we'll talk about the foot. So here you have the foot. So first things first, we have the tarsal bones here, and those are the bones of your ankle. So here we have the tarsals, then we have the metatarsals, and then we have the phalanges. So starting with, you see your tibia and your fibula here. The first bone that we see is the talus. Talus is going to be right here. Hopefully you can see. Then we have the calcaneus, which is the bone of your heel, right here. If you continue to move to the front, you have the navicular bone right in the front of the talus, and then the cuboid bone, which looks like a cube, right in the front of the calcaneus. Then we have the cuneiform bones, so cuneiform, cuneiform, and cuneiform. So the cuneiform that is towards the side of your big toe is called the medial cuneiform, and that's also called the first cuneiform. Then you have the second cuneiform, which is also called the intermediate cuneiform, in between. And then you have the third cuneiform, which is also called the lateral cuneiform, which is going to be more towards the lateral side. So those are all the bones of your foot. So let's go over again. Talus, calcaneus, navicular, cuboid, medial cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform, and then lateral cuneiform. Then you have your metatarsals, and those are numbered as well, starting from your big toe. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we also divide them into the head, the body, and then the base. So the head is always going to be the most distal, and then the base is going to be the more proximal in this case. And then we have the phalanges, which, just like we talked about the hand, the big toe only has 2 phalanges, so it's missing the intermediate phalange, and then the other fingers have 3. Sorry, the other toes have 3. So here we have the proximal phalange, the intermediate phalange, and then the distal phalange. So same thing here, proximal, intermediate, distal, proximal, intermediate, distal, proximal, intermediate, distal. And if we go over, now we start talking about the joints. If you know the name of the bones, then you're good. So the joint between the tarsal and the metatarsal is going to be the tarsal-metatarsal joint. The joint between the metatarsals and the phalanges is going to be called the metatarsal-phalangeal joint. And then the joints between phalanges are called interphalangeal joint. So again, the big toe only has 1 interphalangeal joint. Then the other toes, they actually have 2. We have the proximal interphalangeal joint and then the distal interphalangeal joint. So yeah, that's it. So again, metatarsals, phalanges, proximal phalange, distal phalange, proximal phalange, intermediate phalange, distal phalange. So this is also called the hallux because it's the joint of your big toe. And that is it. So if you guys have any more questions, or if you, just please let me know. I am here to help. Make sure, that's going to be so close anyways. Just make sure that you guys watch the videos and that you also look at the model packages. And don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.